Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Brandon Sanderson, the mad bastard's dropping another book tomorrow. So I am... Actually, no, I think it's dropped. No, that's the email there. Okay, yeah, it has just dropped. Fantastic. He's releasing 4 this year.
Oh my, wow.
You can't be stopped. And they're all, they're obviously not brilliant, but they're also very entertaining. And some of the more entertaining books I've read this year. It's just consistent, good quality. If he was putting it out at this rate and it was shit, that's a different matter. But they're actually good books. They're good books.
Yeah, I think that's it though. When the people who rise to the top of any field are the people who are just yep, this is just what I do. I just do this all day, every day, and I love it. And that's just them, you know?
Apparently, from that article, apparently it's just he has trouble not writing. It's how he kind of lives. Yeah. It's really what he prefers.
The wild thing about that was he doesn't feel any physical pain, which is crazy. He can just be, you can just lie around. Yeah, he doesn't feel pain apparently. According to that, I don't know. Yeah.
That was a twist. I didn't see this conversation taking. He's also he doesn't feel pain.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Podcast Land, where you found yourself specifically in Prose and Cons, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like absolute prose and sometimes we do very much so feel like cons. There's a very fine line between the two, and oh boy, do we oscillate. Anyway, with me today I have Alex.
Howdy. Hello.
And I've got Allie.
Hello.
I'm Phoenix. And Allie, I did want to say earlier, even before we were recording, it's nice to be on a podcast with you again, because I feel like the two of us, I got excited when you were like, yeah, I'm available. I'm like, oh, sweet. I haven't been on a podcast with her in a long time.
Yeah, no, I feel the same. Even this trio, I wonder if we've hit this combo before, because this feels nice.
This does feel new. It's a different.
This is a new pocket.
And also, I just haven't been on in a while anyway, because I've been super busy. And I did want to squeeze one in this weekend, because I will continue to be super busy after this weekend. So it is excellent to be here.
Woo! Well, it's lovely to have you. So the topic we got going on is a bit of a psychological one. We're going to get deep into we're going to play personal therapist here and get into our psyche. Childhood literary trauma or childhood literary gold. We're going to go back way back and see if we can draw some sort of through line from what we watched, what we loved, what really formed that nugget of our literary worlds as a child / early teen, whatever those developmental years, and just kind of play around with it and see if we could have some fun connecting some dots. Maybe there aren't even any dots to connect, but we'll see. To what we write now. But before we do that, we're gonna come back up to the now, here and now, and see what we're all reading, watching, all that stuff. Allie, we'll start with you.
Excellent. Yes, no, I think it's been a while since I haven't been on the podcast. I had to be I've actually consumed a lot of things, but I haven't had a chance to talk about them. So my household, rewind many years ago, we decided we wanted to challenge ourselves and we were going to watch the entire Naruto run as a household together. So including all the filler, so skipping nothing. We're going to watch all of Naruto, all the filler, and then all the way through Shippuden. And we did it. We are changed people at the end of this experience, but we did it, and we're kind of really proud we got through that whole binge. So we've been contemplating a few years later what the next binge would be. We wanted to set a similar task for ourselves again. And rewind a couple of months ago now, we pitched to ourselves, let's watch all the Star Wars media in chronological order. And this was before even Disney a couple of months later popped up and started suggesting it in chronological order. So we're like, Disney stole that from us. We already pitched that a few years a couple of months ago. But we've committed to that, watching all the Star Wars, all the good, all the bad, in chronological order. And obviously you get through the movies pretty quick. We did that, like the early movies. But then we hit the Clone Wars. And I love the Clone Wars, but that's kind of the first big block of things to watch. And I actually really adored it. And I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. Because I've kind of seen snippets of the Clone Wars before, but I hadn't done the full run. And it's just something really charming about, I love the art style. There's some very prettily animated episodes in there, even though they kind of have it's very streamlined, blocky animation, but they've just perfected it. They've simplified it. And sometimes they can just get a really nice sequence. And also there's some really sweet and sometimes quite funny, quirky character moments that you've always been just crying out from the bigger canon. Just the Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka trio is a darling trio. Anakin constantly needling Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan constantly needling Anakin. Oh, it's beautiful, great character. And even just the clones. I love the clones as characters. And I never thought I didn't think I'd be saying that at the end of the Clone Wars. But I'm just like, no, there's some of the hardest, saddest moments. So you're like, oh no, the clones. That die. Anyway,
they're so dedicated.
Yeah, they are. So I highly recommend the Clone Wars. I'm enjoying it. And now we've just started Rebels. So wish us luck on the Rebels run.
Wow. Excellent work. Just really quick for anyone that might not know, how many episodes is what's it called?
Clone
Naruto.
Wars? Oh, Naruto.
Over 9? Is it over 900?
It's got to be about that. It's got to be about 900 episodes. Jesus. It's not an exaggeration.
So there you go. But just so you kind of get a
sense of what was achieved.
Sense of what was achieved. Yeah. Alex, what have you been up to?
Going in a slightly different direction. I've started like kind of doing the classic, like there's this sort of like path of a writer that's sort of suggested to you. I first read about it in Stephen King's On Writing, but where it's basically like you go and you shop around a lot of your short work, because when you start as a writer, you have a lot of short stories. You shop that around to blogs and things and writing magazines. So I've started doing that. I've started going to the Grinder, which is like a really good aggregator for like writing stuff that you can submit to. But in doing that, I
think something else when I think Grinder. I'm sorry. Carry on, Alex.
Yeah, well, we all know where your head's going there, Al. you take your slash fiction back where you found it. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding.
Alex, I think you have the wrong website. I think someone's giving you false writing.
Look, I'll put it in the clip notes. I promise, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
No one's sending me any like unsolicited pictures or anything. It's fine.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, I've been sort of going along and like sending things into different like blogs and stuff, and a couple of like the really prominent ones in Australia, basically. Like Aurelius, I still don't know.
Aurealis.
Let's go with Aurealis.
Oh, okay.
And there's also a horror-based one. So what I've done is I've gone onto the website and just like bought some of their like magazine sort of things and just gone and started reading through those.
Nice.
Just to get a sense of where my work would fit into that and if it's appropriate or if it's not. I've been reading a bit of like. Yeah, so I've just been going through those, the various podcasts associated with them, and it's good. It's really good. Australia's got like a really rich sort of like diverse collection of talent, and there's a lot of interesting writing in there. Some of it is better than others, but it's good. It's like all a fun read. So yeah, I've just been going through that mainly. Yeah,
brilliant.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. That's like what you're supposed to do, is like when you're, it's so tempting to just go around and just like submit, like, whatever. I don't care what they're writing, what they're putting out, but I'm just going to submit. Mm-hmm. And admittedly, I'm guilty of that because it's like submissions take so long in and of themselves. It's like, yeah, whatever. But to actually take your time and just spend some time with the material and have a good time with it and actually enjoy it sounds really therapeutic, as well as like you start building that rapport with that group. Like, and that's really what it's about. It's forming the
and the magazines themselves are like, you know, $2, $5. You buy that, put it on your Kindle, sit up for you know, put your feet up for a couple of hours and just go through it. And by the time you get through it, you're like, oh, I have a good grasp of what this is about. This one is, you know, this one feels like the sort of thing I could do. This one maybe not so much, but you can just get a sense of that. And you know, you get to read some pretty good stories as well. Some of those stories are really, really good. And yeah, it has all sort of different flavors of it. So I really recommend doing your research and knowing your market if you want to go and submit things to that. So yeah.
Very cool. I myself have been, my partner and I have been really plowing through Breaking Bad. I think we're on season 3 now, or season 3 or season 4, but I think season 3. It's been great. It's amazing the ride that main character takes you on, because, you know, in the beginning I'm like, man, what a great guy, and then like now I'm just like, oh man, what a sad guy. Like I don't know. It's like I don't enjoy being in this little camera box over his shoulder anymore, but I still like the show. Beyond that, I'm still reading Más allá de invierno, which is just Beyond Winter. It's a Chilean author I'm reading at the moment. But I've not been doing a lot of reading aside from just work, which kind of bums me out, because I really do like reading and it is so good. But it's like, you know, you read so much for your job. It's like by the time you're done, it's like it's hard to find that time. To sit down with published work. But anyway, that's been me. And now we're gonna follow suit with Allie and rewind, but we're gonna rewind even further. What were you consuming and watching and reading 25 years ago?
Ooh.
Specifically 25.
Not specifically 25. That's a general margin.
Okay.
20-ish years ago.
All right. Well, I'll start us off. I remember being really fascinated with a lot of the Scholastic magazine canon, because I think that's really the first chance a lot of us got as, you know, young preteens to sort of explore, you know, books as opposed.
Are you talking about that magazine we got in primary school?
Yeah. You know the one.
I'm there. I books off that. It was great. Yeah.
It was awesome. Like there were some really, really good books in that. So a couple that I remember. Okay. The first one I remember like getting the first book and being like, oh, this is awesome. And then going through them because they were very short little books. But they were like really action packed. Was Emily Rodda's Del Toro Quest. And it was, actually, even before that was maybe the Wicked series by Paul Jennings. And this is all coming back to me now.
Wow.
And Morris Blightsman.
Yes.
Okay. So let me just go off on a little tangent here. So when I was young, one of the first books I remember getting was, I think it was Unreal by Paul Jennings, okay, who's an Australian author who I haven't actually heard much about recently. I'm sure he's still publishing a lot, but you know, obviously I'm an adult, so.
But his stuff was our era.
Yeah,
like, yeah,
100%. It was the zeitgeist if you were like 12. So it was this book. It had there was like an oyster with an eye in the middle of it, and there were these really spooky stories. It was one of the first instances where I remember being like, oh, this is like unsettling and ambiguous and uncomfortable, and I really liked it. And there were a lot of stories, and honestly, he had a bunch of collections, and a lot of them sort of run together for me. But I remember this one story that was really haunting about this guy who he discovered this abandoned place, and he kind of climbed down there. And he was like, oh, there's all these books and stuff here. There's like, you know, all this stuff. And then like parts of his clothes started to go missing off him. Like he lost a shoe and then he'd lose another. And eventually what happened was like, he was like basically stripped down completely just to his underwear. And then he lost that. And as soon as he lost this last piece of clothing, this other kid appeared and was like, I am so sorry. I had to do this. I'll send help. So he like the kid like runs away from this guy, and then he's trapped down there for like 100 years, like literally 100 years. And then like he discovers that like there's this whole cycle of people going down and like having their clothes stolen off of them, and then like another. Anyway, so the
I'm
same thing
having the
happens.
world's weirdest flashback as you're
Yeah.
describing this. I
Yeah.
think I know it. Oh my god.
Yeah, you've probably read it. It was a major book. Like
Ripped this out of the dark annals of my memory. This is wow.
Anyway, so someone goes down and like the same thing happens, and he like takes the guy's clothes and he goes to the guy, I'll come back, it's fine. Then he goes up top, goes to like a hospital and something and or a police station, goes, hey, there's this thing that everyone thinks he's crazy, gets locked up. That's it. Like it was really dark, and I was like, bro, that's brutal. So that was the first sort of thing where I was like, wow, that was a lot. You know what I mean?
Oh, I love picturing little Alex putting that book down and just saying, that was a lot.
Yeah, I think those were my exact words. That was a lot. But yeah, I think that's, I feel like that informs what I have written a little bit. Just that sense of, the book was literally called Uncanny. And that word, I think, applies to a lot of what I do. It's uncanny. It's like spooky. At least that's what I try to do. Yeah. So that's that.
I love that during this podcast, we're going to talk with such enthusiasm about these stories we love. And it doesn't even matter if they were good or groundbreaking at their time. They were just our first experience with something that was groundbreaking for us. And perhaps the first time we experienced that form of something, and how that hits us and shapes us, excites us, and, you know, would have gotten us into books, into stories, and just, we would have kept feeding that. I'm trying to think back to some of the earliest stuff I was really into. And honestly, I can't get goosebumps. I think like I think, again, Australian standard, it was just a rule that all our school libraries had all the Goosebumps books. So that's what I read at all the school libraries, were the Goosebumps books. I don't think I ever owned any, but I read them all. So I must have been reading them from the library. I'm just piecing together the logic. And I loved the experimental form of them, I think, because some of them were the choose your own adventure ones. Yeah. And I would get really stuck into flicking through all the pages and like how it was gamified and making sure I read every ending. And as I'm saying this aloud, I realize it's the same kind of addiction I feed with my love of Brandon Sanderson, and kind of how you hunt Easter eggs through all 30 of his books now. Almost feels like the next extreme, the adult extreme of that feverish addiction I had to reading those choose your own adventure books, making sure I got every ending. And then I'd even I remember one of them, I would rank them, being like, well, I wonder which is the true ending. And I would judge for myself. I would go through and be like, well, this one thematically tied off the best. This one had a better emotional resolution. This one had more action. I feel like I made a spreadsheet one time.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I'm just recalling it, that I just wanted to go through and get all the different endings and compare them and wonder which was, the quote unquote best ending. Ali's little obsessive little brain, how I worked back then.
And some were really dark too. Some would just finish cold. It's like, yeah, you just died.
You just, the head exploded, and you're like, totally. Okay. And I'd be like, that's intense, but was it narratively satisfying?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I don't know if you remember these books, Alex, but I had the Day My Bum Went Psycho books.
Yeah. That was actually a little bit after my time, I think, but I definitely remember seeing
right.
It. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that was Andy Horowitz or something, was it? Terry something.
Andy.
I know the ones you're talking about, with the big yellow color, and it's got someone's bum on their legs, and you can see the bum. Yeah. I know the book.
Years later, I remember thinking back, being like, what an amazing cover to get kids reading. It was just someone's bum on the cover of a book. And for some reason, I always fell into the demographic of young boys, just anything that interested young boys at the time. That was was what I was reading and into. So it had the same trick on me where I'm like, there's a bum on the cover of this book. That's brilliant. Fucking, I'm sold. Bought all the books, read them. I don't remember them being amazing, but they were entertaining because this kid's like, look, my bum took over the world and this is outrageous. And now I have to work with my bum to try and find an impasse and save humanity. And I'm like, that's intriguing. But I'll keep talking. I just want to keep talking about things I love because I don't think those are
This is great.
The type of stories I ended up writing, but those were the type of stories that got me very early primary school into writing. So say now I'm into reading. Now I'm interested in fun books, finding the next stories. And I recall I want to say they're called the Alex Rider books.
Yes. I remember these.
Yes.
Yeah, I read a couple of those. Yeah.
The Stormbreaker. I think I read them.
Point Blank.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the way up until the Australia one. I don't know if there are any more after the Australia one, which was like book 6, I want to say, in that series.
I think I read maybe 3 of them. Like,
okay.
I was not a great series finisher, but I definitely remember enjoying them. Particularly Point Blank. That was the first one I remember reading.
Was it was it Stormbreaker? Anyway,
no, Stormbreaker was first, but
Stormbreaker, Point Blank. Oh, I see. Yep. But by the time I think they did get to Australia, if there were any more after the Australia book, I didn't read them because to me that felt like, oh well, they've jumped the shark now. They've come to Australia.
Australia?
Like,
is that even real?
It's no longer escapism when they're like they've come to Sydney, and I'm like, oh, you've killed the magic for me. I liked it more when it was like you're a spy in England and Europe. That was far more exciting. I didn't want them to come to Australia, but there's still parts of Stormbreaker, I love the plot. Like in hindsight, it's such obvious plotting, but he would be given all his spy gadgets at the start. And then the plot was just there would be a precise situation or a puzzle that Alex could only get out of if with that tool he was given at the start of the book. So as a reader, you got this really satisfying, the special erosive paste in the toothpaste bottle is relevant to get him out of this situation. My God. And it was just brain exploding watching the plot pay off in such satisfying ways. And it would do it again and again. And it was high stakes. It was spy drama. And I still to this day am really inspired by the feeling. I think it was probably a Stormbreaker scene where he's trapped in the vents. So again, in hindsight, I now know it's probably just stolen from Die Hard, right? But at the time, it was my first experience of the really tense being trapped and having to get through the vents and the claustrophobia of it. And I'm like, that's such a harrowing scene. My God, that's so tense. So I adore that. And I mean, even right now, following the through line to my writing today, I think on the other side of my wedding next month, the next script I'm going to have to go back and edit is a spy script I've been working on for some producers. It's been in the bottom drawer for a couple of years, but recently the producers came back to me being like, hey, we've got some interest in it. Do you want to do a fresh draft? And I'm like, do I? So I get to go straight into writing my spy thriller again. And then so I'm now sitting here thinking of Stormbreaker and I'm like, hell yeah, I've always loved spy thrillers. Always love that shit.
That's a great I mean that just sounds like a great tool for anyone picking up writing. It's like there's no better like plotting practice than just like you introduce a tool in the beginning. That tool becomes relevant to the main resolution near the end. Like that's all it is, and then just doing it with emotions instead or whatever it is. But I also just wanted to say I immediately, as soon as you started talking, Alex, became very aware that I'm the only one that did not grow up in Australia here. And I was like just watching you two, and I'm like, oh, this is very cute.
There's a very specific like just tract of books and material that kids like around the 2000s kind of grew up with, and just anyone listening in Australia is like, right, it's only going to be a second until they bring up Animorphs, and you're right, it is only going to be a second, but we'll get there.
I do know that one. And obviously Goosebumps, that was massive. But I I actually didn't read a lot growing up as a kid, so I recommend I represent that demographic. I know the books that were around, but I was just not attracted, like, because we had like Captain Underpants was a big one that was
Yep.
circulating, and that was the same thing. That was like my bum took over the world or whatever that was. It's like, you know,
bums.
farts and poop and Captain Underpants and bums. Like that's what gets things off the shelf. They sell so well, and it is what builds early interest. My early, I was like a little weird little scientist, like my early literary world. Like I was so, it was like just like random experimentation with things. Like I kept pulling stuff that was way above my reading level, like, but because I was just attracted to it, and because of that it was hard for me to get into it. But I would just like look at these books, like I was very into animals as a kid, very into animals and exploration and stuff like that, and my family had these books that were just like I don't even remember what they were called, but each one was just like exploring a different biome. And like this, like there was one that had a shark on the front, and I was like, ooh, sharks, like yes. But it was just straight up like like Natural Geographic or something like that. So it was way above my head. But I would just like look at the words and look at the pictures, and that's a lot of my very early reading. Yeah, being attracted to material that was way above me. And then I remember when the first series that actually like sucked me in because it was appropriate for my reading level was C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew. One second.
Playing music during the edit.
Yeah.
We can always cut this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I think we should leave it in. Phoenix is talking to an alien in outer space.
I'm just imagining, like, because he's in a public space, like someone is going, like, "Excuse me, you're talking really loudly right now. Can you just shut up?"
You're talking about bums and farts, and we're not.
This is
What's
not what I
going
came
on?
to the library for. So
My setup is so janky right now. But anyway, what I was saying before was the first thing that actually got me into like really into reading was the C.S. Lewis, his whole series. So like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the book before that, The Magician's Nephew. That was the first time I had a moment where I was like, was in the story, and I was like I remember I was reading alone in my parents' room. I actually had to look up from the bed look up from the book because it was so intense. I needed to pull myself out of it. I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to be back in this room for a moment because this is too much. It was the moment where the witch, they were on the witch's planet, like her world, and it was just her awakening and kind of coming. I forget what even happened, but the tension was just palpable. So that was me. This is a lot of I don't know, that was my first series, but other than that, it was just a lot of very exploratory time by myself, wandering around, looking at books, a lot of very photographic stuff, but I didn't do a whole lot of reading. There were a lot of picture books when I was very young. My mom would read to us a lot. And then other than that, I would like pick books up before I was even able to read. I'd pick books up and just kind of look at them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up your mum reading to you, because I think there's something really special about when you first get into books, and if you do have a family connection, if you do have memories of being read to. So we may as well rip the Band-Aid off and get to Harry Potter, because I think that's a big one for our age group, that we were all there in the heart of Harry Potter, the Harry Potter explosion. And my first memories with Harry Potter was mum coming home with the first, I want to say 4 books initially. And she's like, I wanted to read these ones to you, because I think mum had heard about them and then she'd brought them home. And I'm like, okay. I'd never heard of them before. And I'm like, all right. And so, the Philosopher's Stone was mum reading a chapter a night as a bedtime story, and I have all these excellent memories of pronouncing names the way Mum pronounced them, which was hilariously incorrect.
Hermione.
Yeah, I think she was Hermione to
Yeah,
me
okay.
for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Hermione. I always thought it was Hermione. I was like, just because of
love
It
it.
makes sense. Yeah.
phonetically. Like, anyway.
um,
No, I remember that though.
yeah, no, it was just really sweet that those first books they were just ours and our world before the movies happened. And then obviously the movies were a very big deal. Even just kind of the lead up. I remember like all the hype of the casting, and they're dragging these 11-year-olds around being like, we've found the trio, and just how that exploded. And I don't remember going to the movie, like the cinema, for the first one, but I remember going for the second one, Chamber of Secrets, and I remember dressing up. So I was a kid around that age.
Nice.
What, I would have been 12, I don't know. But yes, I had a Harry Potter robe by that point to go see Chamber of Secrets at the local Mwollomba cinema when that one came out.
So good.
Just a lot of like really formative memories around it. And I'm going to steal an anecdote from my housemate Bradley, because he also, I hope he doesn't mind, but he's got a great family story too of he and his family had lived in France for a couple of years during kind of this same time. So when Bradley would have been 12, 13, I want to say, and then he's got a younger brother. And his younger brother was kind of struggling with the, formative age learning English and then moving to France, a different language. So it was kind of they wanted to help the younger brother out and improve his reading and writing. And how they did that is long road trips through France. Bradley remembers reading Harry Potter out loud in the car during the long road trips. And I'm like, that's just really special. And I feel like nearly everyone in our age groups kind of has a Harry Potter story like that. It was just kind of the book everyone used, and funny enough became this read aloud book a lot as well.
I remember my dad reading it to me, actually. Like, he was like, I remember hearing about it a while ago. Like I think it was like before it started. I actually remember being in the sandpit at school and my mum coming to pick me up, and she was like, "Oh, I got this book for you. Like, apparently it's a really big deal." No, she was buying it as a gift for someone. She was like, it's meant to be good. Like, I think this was the Chamber of Secrets. I think it was that time. So it was pre-hype, but
yeah, wow.
Stuff was building up. And I remember being like, oh, okay, that sounds like a thing. And then at some point, I think when Prisoner of Azkaban came out, then I started getting into it and I started reading through it. Or I think maybe my dad was reading it to me. But yeah, I think that was a really special thing, like having someone, if you have a parent who kind of reads something to you, and sets you up to be like, oh no, books are actually, they're not like this hard thing that's meant to be this, big mountain you have to climb that's like insurmountable. They're actually really fun. And I remember I read a lot of audiobooks as well. Like I had this sense of being read to, like, so I would put a tape on and I'd listen to that, and that'd play.
The tapes.
You'd go to the library, you get the tape, and you'd like open it up, and you had to like pop it open, and there were like the tapes were in this little thing, and you had to take them out. So it was really ritualized, and I'd played those and like listened to those as I went to sleep. And I definitely still listen to audiobooks to this day. Like that's definitely come through. But
I remember all the Roald Dahl tapes. That's my memory of how I consumed all the Roald Dahl stories, was via tape, funny enough. Yeah, not the written book.
I actually didn't get into Harry Potter until far later in my life. So some deep lore on me. I had a very traditional like Christian upbringing. So actually things like Harry Potter weren't allowed in, and like we didn't celebrate Halloween, and like I wasn't allowed to watch Scooby-Doo and stuff like that. So like Goosebumps books, though, I didn't read those either. They were around, my friends were reading them. So it wasn't until I was in like high school or something that my friend was finally like, I had more agency over myself and stuff, and was able to, my parents were like, yeah, you could do what you want and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, cool. So my friend was like, all right, let's watch all the movies. And so I started watching them then, and then it wasn't until later in my life that I started reading them. But now, just like, you're telling that story about Bradley and his little brother, like now the Harry Potter books have helped me a lot with my Spanish, like living in Spanish speaking countries and stuff, and seeking those easy, comfortable narratives that I already have a connection with, and using them to then connect and form a connection with a new language. It's been a very valuable tool.
Yeah. No, for lack of a better word, that's very magical.
It is very magical.
I have one more anecdote I want to share. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And I love talking about this idea of how to get young kids interested in reading and getting the next generation interested in reading and writing. I remember being, all right, let's pick an age, 15, I think. It was around the time the 6th Harry Potter book is coming out. So we're talking almost at the peak of the fandom at this point, kind of, because there was still going to be another book to come. The movies are just in the middle of where the movies are up to. So massive, massive hype around book 6, The Half-Blood Prince. And the day of release was the day of a big netball carnival. I love how Australian our anecdotes suddenly are today. So it's a netball carnival.
They really are.
And all of us on the team, all the girls on the team, it was not a question. Like, we had to have the book and had to be reading it, even though this was a very important netball carnival we had been training for months. It's like these things are not, both have to happen simultaneously. So what ended up happening is, on the way to the netball carnival, and like, we're talking early starts, like we need to be there at 7, all the parents had to go to a bookstore, grab the book. Then we get to the netball carnival. Then we're like in our uniforms doing stretches and everything, and we play the first game. And then we sit down, and usually how they round robin the carnivals is you get like a 45-minute break. So we're every break, all of us are in the tent reading. It's just Wyatt, noses buried in the Half-Blood Prince for 45 minutes. Then the big buzzer goes, it's the next, okay, put our books down, then go play the next game of netball for an hour or whatever, and then come, and then we're all reading. And there's amazing things happening where some of us are faster readers than others. And then someone will like gasp, and everyone's like, shut up. More pages, then someone else goes, getting up to the same bit. And I just have a really magical moment of just, for me, that's one of my first tastes of fandom, but even bigger than fandom, because this was just like a generational event, just the release of this book, and we had to read the book this day. Nothing could get in the way of that.
Yeah, no, it's it was such an event, like the Harry Potter. I remember the first one was just, I do want to move on for this because there's a lot of other things to talk about, but
I do have some other questions I want to get to.
Yes, of course.
The first time it really kicked off was with the Goblet of Fire, and that was like the first. And you saw that, and that was a bloody tome. It was a big chunky thing, and I remember having all the what do they call them? Like when books are like set up and opened, like it was like a stall at the front of a bookstore, and like you'd go in when it was there, and they'd literally be gone in like by the end of the day. Like they were up there, and then you came back at the end, were just gone.
It's so cool because like Harry Potter, because we're talking about like on a micro scale, like getting kids involved in reading and stuff like that. Harry Potter marked like a new era in reading because it got like humanity, basically, for lack of a better word, into reading again. And there was like, because not only when Harry Potter books were selling, obviously there wasn't always a Harry Potter book to read. People were more inspired to read in general, and there was a big boom in the book market, in the literary world in general. I've heard like people talk, or like some like editors and publishers in the industry talking about like kind of the Harry Potter boom and like what that did for the industry in general.
Yeah, because you read it and then you're like, well, now I'm hungry for the next thing. Like for me, it almost marked the moment where reading was just something that I did sometimes, to I'm now a reader on the other side of Harry Potter. So the other big ones for me were the Maximum Ride books. I remember being really inspired by, I loved those. And then I know we do want to move on, but I will mention the Twilight phenomenon as well, because it is worth marking again, just because it came a few years later. So kind of the Harry Potter boom has settled down, and then suddenly Twilight arrives. And I've had such a fun relationship with my experience with Twilight, because I was deep in it. It hit me right at the right time. I was the perfect market for it. And then you get on the other side of high school and you're just like, cringe, I'm never going to acknowledge that period in my life ever. And then now I'm past 30 and I can look back at this very charming, very normal teenage phase I went on, and how amazing it was for, I don't know, girls my age to have like found this thing and made it our thing. And I love, so before I was talking about kind of the quadrants where I was very into whatever young boys and was things being marketed at young boys I was really into. That was kind of the first time that I was into something that was marketed at girls, and the power of like female fandom and being a part of that was its own experience for the first time, and it was huge.
True.
And I think I want to say book 4 or book 3, a friend and I actually took the day off school, because now we're a little bit older in high school and we've got a bit more autonomy, like with permission, not from the school, but from our parents. We took the day off school because we're like, the Twilight book's coming out today. And we go to the bookstore. The bookstore wasn't quite ready yet. It was the book before Twilight was huge. So there were no lines, there were no fanfare, but my friend and I were there and we're like, it's release day for the book. And they're like, is it? And they're like, oh, we'll just check the back stocks.
You know, the book that everyone's getting.
And they're like, ooh. And they're like, we'll text you when we find it. So we're just walking around the shopping center for an hour, killing time. We get a text message being like, we found the book.
Oh, wow.
My gosh.
We run back to QBD or whatever it is in Tweed City, and they give us the knife and they let us open the box.
Oh,
and I remember,
so
wow.
and it only happened because it wasn't like huge yet. And then we literally got to pick the books out of the box, and we're like, yeah, it's rad. And then it ended up being Break and Dawn, which I remember reading at the time being like, okay, now this is a piece of shit. And then, like, I loved like book 1, 2, 3. I adored. I was deep in it, and something weird happened on book 4, and that just, it broke the spell for me, whatever book 4 did in the series. But I still have the moment of this precious memory of opening and getting the book.
I love that.
And I think something about that made me want to be a writer, kind of both the Harry Potter experience and the Twilight fandom. Something about that was like, I want to be a part of this. This industry is so cool. This energy is so cool. If I can someday create something that has other people as worked up as I am, and can be a fan of my stuff and have ownership in the worlds I create, it's something so special about that I think is what ultimately got me into this crazy thing we're doing.
Yeah. It's almost like a sense of like contributing to culture. You know what I mean? It's like, it's this sense of, even if maybe in a very, very small niche way, I can be a part of this bigger thing. Like, I mean, you know, my stuff is usually like horror and you know, like uncanny fiction, weird fiction, that sort of stuff. And that's actually quite a, like, for what it is, it's quite a, like, there's quite a few Australian like horror authors. It's kind of like a little cottage thing there. So it's like, oh wow, if I can like contribute in some small way to that community and maybe bring it further acclaim or get people further into it, and then meet people who read that sort of stuff and then be like, oh, you did that thing. And I'm like, yeah, I did that. And then there's it's that sense of community and you know, coming together and being like, this is something that we can share, like something that I made, but that you can have a stake in as well.
Yeah.
You know? Like, and being on both sides of that fandom is, that sense of fandom and community is like, it's really special.
This is okay. So this kind of leads into my next question a little bit. So one thing, so we talked about what we were reading back at that time, but what I really wanted to focusing on now were like, and we kind of already touched on this, but like, because obviously as children and early teens and stuff, the memories we're making are very formative, and they do kind of stick in a special way. So what are those moments, and we'll keep this short and then we'll jump to the next question, but what are those moments like? What is like a moment that is just burned into your mind of like, more so in a book, I guess, as like you're reading something and something just like stuck with you, be it like mildly traumatic, mildly amazing, whatever it was, what was really like, I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind.
Well, I can remember reading William Golding's Lord of the Flies in on the last day of school. I think it was maybe year 11 or maybe year 10. I can't remember which one, but it was the last day of school. There was nothing else going. And I was just like, like the teacher just literally, there was no one at school because everyone was like, it's the last day, who cares? So it was just like me and maybe 3 other kids in the school. And the teacher was like, we got some books, read some books.
Wow.
And so we did that and went through that. And I just went through and was like, this was a book that I'd heard of, like Lord of the Flies. It's this whole thing. And I just remember going through that and being like, wow, that is a really good story. It's like, it's very, very chilling and unnerving and like disassociating almost, and just being like, wow, that's a story right there, you know?
For me, I'm going to say it's anime. I've mentioned the books that I loved, but so if I had Harry Potter with mum, anime is what I had with dad, where of an evening when I would kind of come home from school, there were anime reruns on Cartoon Network and stuff. There was both Dragon Ball Z, and I'd seen Dragon Ball Z younger as Cheese TV of a morning, as Alex would know. But then in my teen years, rewatching Dragon Ball Z, slightly older, still loving it maybe even more with more appreciation. Around this time, Naruto's coming out. And just those really epic stories, and the way shonen anime is structured in that it is this lead up to this climactic fight, and it's the most tense, everything matters, all emotions, the world is pinned on this. Like it's just how it can string a bow like that right until the fight. Like it just worked on me like hook, line and sinker. Just whatever anime was doing in that structure had me. I was deep into it, really invested in the characters. And it became like one of my favorite parts of my routine is like obviously school work, and then late of an evening watching the 30-minute anime episode with dad every evening. It was just a great ritual. And then dad being equally kind of being like, I don't know what Sasuke's got to do next week, but it's going to be bad. Being like, all right.
I love that.
And I can almost draw a through line to why writing Majesty and creating the Majesty world became the first world I wanted to write and create. And that's pretty much since then, that's the one that I wanted to. I'm like, I'm going to start world building my own thing that kind of looks like a shonen anime. And kind of on my own writing practice. And then being a young adult, I decided, well, no, I actually need to go and learn a way to write if I want to create this world. But the actual world building started around that time. And I think what draws me to it, and what I think is so cool about magic swords and fight scenes and characters that have a lot of emotions and angst, is all rooted in this love of anime.
That's okay. Okay, cool. Keep with that energy. I think you're already kind of going into my next question a little bit. But for me, I was just, while you were talking, I was thinking about myself, and there are 2 distinct moments apart from the magician's nephew moment that stuck with me. There was one moment when this is a little bit later, I was in high school and we were reading The Great Gatsby in English class. And it's amazing. I also just wanted to say, it's amazing how the difference between reading a book for English class and the like reading a book on my own, just worlds apart, the experiences. Like everything in English class just felt stale, and like if anything, it turned me off to reading. But anyway, there was one moment when I was reading The Great Gatsby that really just held me, where I was again very in the story, and it's just this little subtle motion where I forget the characters' names, but one of the primary female characters' names and the primary male character, not Gatsby. I forgot all names save for Gatsby.
So there's Tom and Daisy.
Yeah.
Tom and Daisy.
then
Okay, it wasn't Daisy though. It was Daisy's friend. The one.
Oh, the friend.
The friend.
Oh dear, I've forgotten her name too. Yep.
Her name is Oh dear. So Tom is at the party. It's near the beginning. Tom's at the party, Gatsby's party, and is talking with Oh dear. And someone comes up to talk to Oh dear, and she just does this thing where she turns to talk to this person, but puts a hand on Tom's hand to show him that like she's not leaving the conversation. She's like still with him. And that little gesture just felt so human and natural and elegant. And like that little gesture stuck with me so much. I was like, oh my gosh, like just that gesture sucked me into the story. Like I was there, and it was like that, as well as like another formative literary moment was in a video game for me, Kingdom Hearts. I did a lot of I watched my brother play a lot of video games as a kid, and that one just like existentially struck me because of like, well, one, you have like all this Disney like influence, which already has a psychological influence on all the kids of that generation. But just like, I remember the ending of that game, watching my brother beat that game, and how it ended with them being like pulled apart, like across the universe, across realities or whatever. And like, I was different for the rest of that day. Like I remember walking around outside, like my cousins were over. I was just like meandering around the street in the grass and just like looking at the ground, thinking about that. So there's some plot points. Yeah.
I did a sneaky Google. Jordan is the character's
Jordan,
name?
yes.
Jordan?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Jordan.
I remember really enjoying Gatsby in school as well, thinking of the school curriculum books. That one, so a lot of them, some I hated. I hated Scarlet Letter. I hated
Scarlet Letter. I was just going to say that.
Test the D'Urbables I hated, but I loved Gatsby. And one that really changed me, we're thinking like year 11, 12 now, was Spy Who Came In From the Cold. I read around that time. So again, we're back on spy thriller. And it's not so much any moments from that book, but it was the feeling of that book I carried for a long time. And even if I pick up the cover now, I think that emotion still comes back to me of just the dread, the loneliness, the heaviness, the weight of the world that's all in this little book. And I remember feeling all that for the first time reading that, and I'm like, I'm a spy in the Cold War, and just I'm a moody old man that loves cigarettes, and I just love putting on those shoes. And that's also quite addictive, I think, kind of being pushed out of my comfort zone into a whole new world and adoring it.
Yeah, getting to experience that. That's like I'm going to sound like a psycho now. Reading Catcher in the Rye and being like, wow, it's really relatable in a really, really strange way. And everyone knows about that statistic about like all serial killers haven't been found like with a copy
with Catcher in the Rye.
But I promise I haven't serial killed anyone, so it's fine. But yeah, like that whole story about like, you just read it and you're like, wow, this guy is just like me. He's just like some kid in New York, and he does a bunch of stuff and he's like messing up all the time, but like right at the end he's like, I just want to protect the kids. I just want to be able to catch the kids when they run through the like, and it's like, oh, that's really sweet. And it's just this very humanizing moment in this whole book of the guy going like, they're all phonies, they all suck, everyone, and there's just this one moment right at the end where he's like, maybe I could do this, maybe this would be nice. It's like, and as a like moody 16-year-old. Actually, I was quite a chipper 16-year-old, to be perfectly honest. But as a 16-year-old, you're kind of like, wow, I can relate. I wonder what else he's written. But no, that was a very formative moment, I think.
So this brings me to a little ghost of Jose just popping up.
Like someone dancing in the background. I was really into it.
Just for a second, you like popped in. No, you're gone. Yeah. All right. This brings me to the last question that I thought might help us fully anchor in this through line. Okay. So formative memories. We also have like seeing as a child, the things we're being shown kind of just become our reality. So it's like, if our parents give us a book, And it's like, hey, this is supposed to be a really good book. In our minds, it's like, oh, this is a really good book. This is what a really good book looks like. This is what a really good author looks like. This is what writing is. This is what an author is. And we start forming the ideas of what an author is, what it means to write a book, what it means to, like, I'm a real author when X happens then. Like that sort of, we could start to make those sorts of associations. So I guess as you're writing now, do you notice that you have any particular thing that's kind of on a pedestal, some sort of mark that you have in your mind of like, I'm a real writer when? And maybe you haven't even told yourself this story before, but it's something, and it's like I have this feeling that I have that, but I don't even have a particular title in mind, but it's like this benchmark that I could kind of feel of like, that's what a writer is. And that's what I'm reaching for. Do you have any pedestals that you're aware of?
I think I've got one, and this might surprise you guys a little bit, because I remember as a kid, my parents would constantly be like, oh, you should read this book, but not now, when you're a little older. And my dad would consistently say this, you should read this book, but maybe you're a little young for it. So eventually I was like, what's this book? What, like, and they kept saying it. And you know what that book was? It was The Hobbit. And they were right. And I remember reading it at a school carnival and being like, oh, wow, this is just like just going through it and just being like, wow, this is amazing. Maybe until the Battle of Five Armies. And at that point, I was kind of like, okay, we've done the dragon bit. This is fine. You know, but like, that prose was just as a basic narrative arc is just so tightly wound and just so, it's just that classic, like you go here and then you go to the spooky place and then you go to the other spook, you know, it's just moving through it. And there's, so that I think almost might be the subconscious benchmark of like, hey, this is what a really good book looks like, you know?
Yeah, no, I think I keep setting new goal markers for myself, because some of my, I don't know, it's really exciting to say some of the first markers I set myself, I've managed to reach, and then I hit them. So I keep lining up new ones. And thinking about it today, it made me realize that for me, the process is complete. So the act of writing, I complete something, and then I do want to get it out in the world. And then the final step is hearing someone else has consumed it and what they thought about it. And for me, that's the final end mark for me. Like I know for some people, maybe it's enough just writing the thing. Maybe people will say, oh, good, I'm done when it's out there, but I don't need to be a part of the discourse. I think I am someone who it's like, no, the final step, the discourse at the end is kind of what I'm in it for better or for worse. And I think it is because I am motivated by the love of fandom, and that I kind of love this idea that I want to gift these things out into the world. Gift is not the right word, that's a really gross word, but I'd love to see them go out into the world and for someone else to make it their own and enjoy it as much as the stuff I enjoyed when I was a fan, and the things I'm still a massive fan of. So I think that's why I'm gravitating towards things like Metropius, which are designed to create fans. They are a world you dive into. Things like Majesty. I guess one of my early benchmarks when I was as a screenwriter is I'm like, well, the finished product is sitting in the cinema at the premiere. And that got to happen for Unsound at the Mardi Gras Film Festival. Was really cool. And we kind of spoke after the film. And I think I said something to the effect of like, because that was a trial of a lead up and a development. And right at the end, I think I said something to the effect of, even if just one person watches this and feels like they see themselves up there, then like this whole thing has been worth it for me. And someone at the after party came up to me and they're like, look, I heard you say that thing, and I just wanted to let you know that I felt seen. I saw myself up there in your work. And like I nearly broke down in tears. And I think I gave them a massive hug. And that moment's really stuck with me as like that closed the loop. The 5-year journey was worth it for that one moment, and anything else that came after that almost didn't matter, because I'm like, the loop has been closed on that project for me. That was it went out into the world, and then someone, even just one person who I didn't know, a stranger, reacted to it, and I got to hear the reaction, and then I'm just like, it's done, it's great. So So I feel like that's now a similar bar I'm setting myself for books. I don't quite have a book of my own out there yet. I'm very excited to hold the physical thing because I spent so much time adoring holding the physical thing. You can see all the books behind me. I love the physical object. So I'm very excited for hopefully one day having a physical object, but then also I got to go to a book signing the other day, which was really exciting. And I got, cool. And even though I was signing, I ended up signing 3 while they sat me next to Garth Nix, who had a massive line, which was really funny. There was this full circle moment of, go pre-COVID 4 years ago, I was lining up to get one of my books signed by Garth Nix. And then it was fast forwarding to that weekend, and I'm sitting next to Garth Nix as a quote unquote equal at this signing table for people to come up and get things signed. And I'm like,
so cool.
I'm like, this is another moment that I can just mark as a benchmark moment. And I was kind of making jokes about it. And Garth Nix said to me, he's like, don't worry, they once at a con sat me between Neil Gaiman and George R.R. Martin. He's like, no one was in line to see me.
Gosh.
Yeah, that's a high bar.
So obviously, like, these markers keep on moving for everyone. Like, there is no, I've made it. You're always setting the next bar. But I do enjoy that fandom interaction. And I don't know if I want to be like, if one day I get to see my thing become a fandom, whatever that is, that would be real special.
That's like while you were talking and mentioned the fandom stuff, I feel like that's what because I've been digging into myself for a while, and it's like the thing that has stuck with me is like the fandom and the bonding, but it's not because it's like I want people to be fans of my work. It's because I'm already a fan of my work, so it's like I want more fans in here with me.
Invite
for
them
my
into
own
the room.
fandom. Because I'm the only one in here. So for some of the worlds feeling I'm constructing, so it's like I just want to get other people in here to be like, right, isn't this wild? Like I'm right there. I'm my number one fan, so it's like I just want some other people to talk about this with.
As an aside to that, and something I realized with the psychology of it, so I'm really bad at pitching Majesty, and I'm really bad at trying to sound excited by Majesty because it's so close to me and it's so raw, and I'm like, oh, then these characters do this thing and it's cool, I promise. While I'm much better at talking about Cypress, because Cypress is like that one step removed. I'm talking about people who actually existed, and I can be like, and then get a hold of this fucking lunatic then went and did this and got away with it. And I can actually sound like I am super invested, but I can talk about it as this external thing and be really excited about it. And then other people light up and they're like, that sounds insane. I want to know more about that. And I'm like, right.
Yeah.
So it is funny, like with Cypress, I'm like, come into this fandom that I'm excited about how insane this story is. More people need to know about that. And that's a driving force. And you're right. I think we all want to bring that same energy to what we're building. And I've got to get better at it with Majesty because it's the exact same thing. I'm like, they're running around with cool swords. I think if you're a fan of cool magic swords, you would also like this thing that I happen to like.
Yeah.
Like swords? We got swords.
It's got swords. What more do you want?
Because sometimes there's this feeling of like, I literally just put something down on the page, and then it's like I turn away from my laptop and I'm like to my partner, I'm like, you would not believe what this character just did. And it's like, it's like you made it up. It's like, but
sort of.
It fits. It fits in the story. It is crazy. It's wild. But like, so I don't know, that's a big motivator for me because it's like I do remember those moments of being pulled into someone's world, and it's like, now I'm being pulled into my own worlds, and I just want to bring other people into this to relate on that. I think that's what's on my pedestal, is these world where you see the world. Like, that's just such an amazing moment. And so as a writer, I'm creating those moments for myself again, and I just want to share those moments. I just love those moments, so I just continued making them, I guess, is what I'm doing. That's the last question I had.
Yeah.
we're at the end of the episode.
It's a lovely note to end on. Yeah.
And I think we did get there. Like, we really did make a through line. I don't know. I feel like we found it. I feel
Found the
I
thematic.
feel somewhat. I feel therapized a little bit for myself. Yeah, that was satisfying. All right. Well, with that, we'll close it down. So we got 2 quotes for you today. First one here is by our very own J.K. Rowling. I think it's the books that you read when you're young that live with you forever. That just felt very pertinent. And then Alex, you had another one.
Yes, I've got another one by Frank Serafini. And he says, there is no such thing as a child who hates to read. There are only children who have not found the right book.
That's so sweet.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah, I think it's cute.
Yeah, it really makes it accessible to everyone, which I love that.
Such a wholesome message.
Yeah.
Keep looking, kid. You'll find something that's for you.
Yeah. And everyone's welcome. Even if you've never read your entire life, you're welcome.
By the way, guys, just a reminder that our book, The New Mythic, is available on Amazon, and we would love it if you get a copy to, give it a bit of a review. And just let us know what you think of it on Amazon Goodreads.
It's that very same book that Ellie was signing next to Garth. So
That's
there's
right.
that.
You can either get a Garth Nix book, or you can grab The New Mythic.
Yeah.
And you're also listening to a podcast called Prose and Cons. And if you like it, if you're on Spotify, if you're on Podbean, or however you consume your podcast, please leave us a review or just a star rating. That helps us with the algorithms.
Mm-hmm. And with that, we'll close it down. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
See ya.
I had this weird sonic moment where I feel like I could hear the theme music playing as you started outroing.
Yeah.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.